We're now joined by Umar Yakubu, who is criminal justice crime expert. Mr. Yakubu, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So we're talking about organized crime and especially money laundering.
Yeah.
How much of a problem is that in Nigeria?
Of course, it's a global problem, and why it's more of a problem in Nigeria is that we're a developing economy. So we need all the money we need to finance infrastructure, to finance education, finance health. So when most of the money is going out of the country, it's not good for our economy. That is why we cannot develop. And there's a lot of data, especially one done by the UN last year, where they have data of where assets are being taken. If you look at the map, you see that a lot of funds are going out of Africa. Meanwhile, only a few is coming into Africa.
How much, when you say a lot, do you have a figure? So for instance, from Nigeria, do you have a figure share with us?
I'll use the African Union High Panel on, they did a study way back in 2014. That's the most recent study on illicit financial flows, and back way then it was about $140 billion over 14-15 years. So that translates to about $10 billion a year.
So in terms of fighting money laundering in Nigeria, from what you know, are we doing well in this regard?
Yeah, the best person to ask this is the regulatory organization or the supervisory organization, which is the Financial Action Task Force, that assesses all countries across the world on what they are doing on money laundering. And so far, let's say between 2012, 2013, we have not been doing well till date, because we have been blacklisted so many times, and now we're on the grey list. So that tells you we're not doing well. So
we've had reports about private jets being used to take out raw materials from Nigeria, sometimes monies. What do you know about that you can share with us? How big of a problem is that?
No, when you look at the data, if you are taking 2014 data, about $10 billion a year, and from 2014 till date, it is much more than that. The amount that can be taken through private jets can never be close to what is being taken through the main intermediaries, which are the financial institutions, the banks, the bureau de changes. That is where most of these monies are taken to. There's a limit to what you can take in cash, because of there's some degree of checks at the airports. I'm not saying it's effective, but when you look at the banks, that's where most of where the money goes through.
So we're talking about banks. It means that we have weak regulations, or is it that the enforcement is not strong enough if this kind of monies are still going through banks?
Yeah, when we're even being assessed, when it comes to our technical compliance, which is the regulations and the laws we have, are always scoring high. In Nigeria, I'm doing much better than a lot of Western countries. But when it comes to the effectiveness of the utilization of those laws and regulations in curbing money laundering, you find that that's where we're doing poorly. So the financial sector regulator, which is now the Central Bank of Nigeria, needs to do a lot, because most of the medium research has shown, most of the medium where money is being taken out are through the financial sector services.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge of law enforcement in this regard? Because without enforcement, then the problem continues.
Yeah, law enforcement will forever be overburdened in Nigeria, because the mediums, the preventive mechanisms have to work. It's when they fail that law enforcement comes in. So when you have a financial sector regulator, let's say in this case the Central Bank of Nigeria, not effectively supervising the banks against illicit financial flows, against money laundering, of course you are going to have a fallback. All the money goes out. Then is what comes out now that the law enforcement will go and start checking. So the financial sector regulator has to do much more in prevention of money laundering and illicit financial flows.
So do you see that the regulator is probably not doing his job, is in bed with people they shouldn't be in bed with, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's definitely, because if you look at the data in the last 10 years, you will not see the data of any bank MD being suspended. You will not see data of any bank being fined, because if you don't want to suspend the bank MD, at least they should be fined to the banks. So if there's no fine that is detrimental enough to dissuade the bank from carrying out those activities, they will continue to do it. And even where there are fines, you find out that the fines are too little, that it is more profitable for the bank in this case to do the money laundering or the activity and pay the fine, because they have not put enough dissuasive sanctions, so that they deter the bank not to do so.
How does this problem threaten our national security?
Wow, it does threaten our national security in so many ways. If you are losing 10 to 15 billion dollars of income, of money every year, what you are breeding poverty, you are breeding insecurity. When you breed insecurity, you find that there are more people going to commit violence. They go into crime. More people cannot access healthcare, cannot access water, cannot access education. So, of course, and this is a developing economy, you need all the money you can get to put into development. So it's going out, and the inflow is much less. So it's sapping resources, and don't forget our growth rate, population growth rate now is between 3 to 5%. So it's going to be it's a serious problem.
There is an international dimension or angle to all of this. It's not happening, alone within the continent.
Yeah.
So do we have a say or power over how you stop the international leg of it?
It's actually quite difficult because we're in a globalized world now. From your phone now, I'm sure you can transfer money to other countries. There are different electronic platforms where you can transmit money. Things have evolved. Now you even have crypto. You have other mediums of exchange. So it's much more difficult. That's why it's a global phenomenon that every country has a role to play. But other countries are doing well, while we are not doing so well in this regard.
So let's come back to Nigeria. In terms of the actors, whether it's organized crime or money laundering, where do most of the actors come from? What sector? Is it public officials? Is it ordinary Nigerians? Is it politicians? What are we looking at?
Public sector corruption, purely public sector corruption. Because let's say you take the data of, let's just say last year, you have a 10 trillion naira budget under your capital expenditure. You have the current, then the capital is 10 trillion. Now that's at the federal level. Let's assume you have another 10 trillion for all the states and local governments. That's 20 trillion. Now, with that 20 trillion for capital expenditure, it is 90% procurement. And during procurement, we are building roads, buy cars every year. We're buying computers, buying chairs, buying cars, buying ACs. That is where the money goes to. So that is the problem we have. There is no effective mechanism. You have the Bureau of Public Procurement. They are supposed to check that. But it's a weak system, a weak agency, and they are not doing what they're supposed to do.
So what are the typical stages of money laundering and the common methods that we see in Nigeria?
Yeah, what the data has shown, we're actually a heavily cash-based economy, yes, but that has not shown, because of the volume and amount, a lot. There are different studies, but the summary of the studies is that a lot is through the deposit money banks, followed by the bureau de change, and now all these internet platforms, IT-based platforms, that you can send a lot of money without really being checked. That's because of the amount is very high. And don't forget now, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, we have this surge in the printing of naira. I'll call it printing, you may call it ways and means. So when there's more naira in the economy, because the naira is not being used for productivity, it's being changed to a foreign currency and sent abroad.
So you heard the report. Interpol said hundreds of thousands of dollars are laundered out of Nigeria to other African countries and other parts of the world. I mean, so this is not new to you. What are your thoughts on that story?
Yeah, I think it's just more of media sensationalism
because How?
Because the data has been there. If you take, even if it's $10 billion a year, if you have 260 days in a year and divide that, you find that it's about $38 million every day. And this is 2014-15 I'm talking about, where now the data has shown corruption has increased, at least in the last 5-6 years. So you can easily estimate, let's say, $50 million every day. So what he said might be synonymous. But the data from the Interpol, if you even want the more accurate data, should be from the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, because they have a more robust platform for checking all these things. What the Interpol will see may not even be up to 50% what the NFIE will see.
Right. So the Vice President of the Interpol, Garba Umar, he did say that they are launching a new initiative to tackle this problem. Do you think that will make any dent? I mean, apart from what we're already doing.
Yeah, the problem is not that of law enforcement, it's not that of Interpol, nor of the EFCC, or even the NFI. It's more of the sector regulators. When you have the CBN doing its work, you have the Bureau of Public Procurement doing its work, you have the Office of the Head of Service doing its work because of procurement issues, all these institutions doing their work to prevent the act from happening. Then when it's reduced, then law enforcement can come in. But you cannot release 8 trillion through illicit procurement practices, then you expect law enforcement and Interpol to come. They can't catch much. How many EFCC officers are you going to have?
So in your experience doing this work, how much of consequence have you seen as a prevention, from the crime?
Yeah, what we have a very good legal framework. All the laws are there. We also have very good institutions, in my view, well-resourced institutions in terms of manpower, in terms of finance, and in terms of training. What is lacking is the political will and the effectiveness to do the right thing. That is the major issue.
So there are definitely implications for this, ethical, social implications on society. How do you see that?
Security implications. All the crises you have in the northeast today, the Boko Haram in the northwest, the banditry and kidnapping in the southeast, north central, farmer herders crisis are all, symptoms of corruption.
Yes.
Is what they have birthed to is also corruption. The mechanisms are not working. Because if not for corruption, let's use an example of when we're paying subsidy, assuming we have stopped paying subsidy now. There were about, let's say, if you can do the math, about 400 trailers were leaving Nigeria. Now, it means the people responsible for our national border security, now which is the customs and the immigration, there are other people to involve, could not see physical 400 trailers, 33,000-liter trailers leaving the shores of our country every day. Where will they see a bag of dollars and stop it? So the preventive mechanisms have to work and they have to be effective. Then law enforcement can come in.
Because now that you mentioned the North, there's a lot of money that is moved around, whether it's in terms of the ransoms from the kidnapping, from the Boko Haram. And there's a saying that you can always trace the money.
Yeah.
It means that we haven't really been tracing the money, because if we have been tracing the money, then you can cut off that bloodline so that you can cripple the organizations.
Yeah, and back to like what you just said, most of these monies now, I can tell you, are even paid through bank accounts. And who are the regulators of these bank accounts? That is the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, if a deposit money bank does not do its due diligence to ensure it does not onboard a terrorist, a kidnapper, and all of them, ransom taker, what do you do to that bank? What do you do to that account? You are supposed to be monitoring your accounts of all your clients, checking their activity. Somebody cannot be earning 5,000 in one day. The next thing you see 2 million and you do nothing about it. If it's cash-based, to when they're bringing the cash to deposit in the bank, there are mechanisms you are supposed to check. So all these things actually have to do with the financial sector, and the regulator there has to step up.
So that's a big indictment on the government.
If you say government is a big fish, it's better to narrow down to the agencies. That's why I'm calling agencies for you. I said the Central Bank.
They're part of the government.
Yeah,
they're institutions.
The institutions of
government.
Of course, institutions of government.
So what role does cybercrime play today in all of this?
It's huge. It's huge. We are too globalized. Internet is getting faster. People are getting more sophisticated. We're in a globalized network, so people and the mechanisms, they are much faster than the preventive mechanisms put in place to stop all these things. But I'm aware the National Security Office of National Security Advisor have a National Cyber Crime Center, and they want to do something about it.
And they even wanted to have a levy, cybercrime levy, recently, and a lot of people thought,
of course,
did you think that was a good idea?
No, I don't think it was a good idea, because that levy is money from the transactions of the banks. So a government cannot come and be taxing transactions of between a bank and its customer. The government cannot do that, or government should not do that.
Okay. Mr. Umar Yakubu, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's it for this edition of Arise Primetime. Do join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, it's goodbye and thank you for watching.